know, 3 years ago in March of 2007, NASCAR introduced at the Bristol race the car of tomorrow that we're still racing today. Well, the unique feature about that car was the rear wing on the back of the car. 3 years later, starting in Martinsville this weekend, the rear wing is going away and we're going back to the conventional rear spoiler that we were used to seeing for so many years on our race car. And Doug, it was announced back in the off season that this was going to happen shortly into this 2010 season. And there's been a lot of testing. In fact, teams were at Charlotte Motor Speedway this week, and over 20 teams were at Talladega last week, helping NASCAR actually determine a lot of things about the size of the rear spoiler and the angle for the Talladega race coming up.
Yeah, everybody, you know, when the wing first came out, it's like, oh gosh, you know, what's this wing going to look like? Well, the transition is here. We're going back to the spoiler. Well, let me tell you something about the wing. This wing right here, if you'll notice underneath, you see these mounting areas right here that bolted to the deck lid. Those same 4 bolts on each side is what's going to be policed by NASCAR. They have changed the overall claw template to go ahead and police those holes, and they're going to be really stringent on center line location, the size of the hole, how much slop there is. So, okay, off with the wing, and here we come back with the spoiler over here.
We hear a roar from the crowd.
But you can see right here, this spoiler, we've seen some in some of the B-roll that we've had, that it just fits the contour and the shape of the quarter panels. It's bolted here on the backside. Now, this spoiler blade is a part number of Richardson Racing products. That's all teams have to use this blade at the track during competition. You can make your own for testing or something like that. But this is the shape. This is what we get to see from now on.
All right, so the size for Talladega, they worked on that a lot, and we're going to talk about that here shortly. What did they actually end up for angle and for height of the rear spoiler at the Talladega test?
Well, pretty much all races, including the test that was done at Talladega, it's going to be 70 degrees, and the Speedway blade was 4.5 inches tall. We started with some extra pieces on the end, but during this test, NASCAR was determining what do we need? What will the closing rate be? What do we need for the best competition? And I think we'll still see some changes down the road there, but 4.5, and you see it right here.
So pretty much compared to our old Speedway car where we ran 55 degrees, 57 inches wide, and 6 3/4 inches tall, substantially different. Now, Chad, before we get to this next one, let's take a look at one of our viewer email questions. And that email question actually comes from Julie. And what Julie wants to know is, why did NASCAR come up with the puppy ears? What purpose do they have? Also, how did they determine the height of the spoiler? I don't know that the puppy ears are actually an issue anymore.
Well, they're not. And that's one of the things that we did at the test. We had a 12-inch segment here on top of the spoiler by 2 inches high, and it just raised it up, and they got nicknamed the puppy ears because they look like puppy dog ears sticking up there. What the reason was for that was to increase the drag on the race cars so we could run a larger restrictor plate. We want to get the throttle response back in these cars so the drivers can really get after it. Well, the problem is when you increase the drag that much by adding those ears onto the spoiler, it really allowed the closure rate of the cars to pick up tremendously. To get away from somebody else or to try to get along somebody and pass them, that was almost impossible to do because all you had to do is get over here on the right side of a car and you could just stall it out because of that big block of spoiler you had sitting there. So NASCAR came in, cut that out, and what that did is it made the cars a lot faster now by themselves, about 0.6 of a second faster a lap by themselves. But in the draft, it wasn't as substantial because it wasn't as easy to get behind somebody and tuck up on them and push them and get them away from the field and pick up that draft and that extra speed. So it's kind of a learning process like we spoke about. We don't know exactly what all we're going to be doing, but I think the puppy dog ears are out.
All right, so Booty, Doug touched on it just a little bit. If for right now for the Talladega race coming up in about a month and a half, the height of that spoiler is going to be 4.5 inches. I don't think the spoiler for all the other tracks, starting with Martinsville, is going to be quite that tall.
No, what NASCAR did was they took the existing car with the wing, and they have wind tunnel numbers from it, down force, side force, etc. And when they made this transition, they knew they wanted to keep it very similar. So our package, we could use, it wouldn't be as large a transition. Keep things to a minimum so this expenditure wouldn't be so high. So essentially what they did was work with different sizes of spoilers in the wind tunnel to get a match. And what that ended up being was 64.5 inches wide, and that's more dictated because just of the rear shape of the deck lid, I'd say, but 4 inches tall. And as Doug alluded to, it's going to be 70 degrees across the board. And with that more or less matched the downforce of the existing car.
Yeah, I got to follow up on that. On our old car, did NASCAR mandate a spoiler angle? We know they always did for Daytona or Talladega, but did they mandate a spoiler angle for the other racetracks?
No, you had some leeway there, what you want to do. You could lay it back a little for qualifying if you so chose, or you could come forward for more downforce. So it was a little more tailoring. Right now, though, they don't want us messing with that because that opens up another window for us to modify a lot of things, which could lead to some discrepancies that they don't want. They want to keep competition very close.